Welcome to Alimentary, the podcast series where you will learn about your amazing body, how it works, and of course why food is so important, and also pick up some simple recipe and lifestyle tips and tweaks to help you to influence your health in a positive way. Welcome back to Alimentary. In this episode, we explore an inspiring story and talk to someone who teaches practical solutions which make a real difference in people's lives. So today, I am thrilled to introduce our guest, Brenda Cassidy, founder of the Braincalm Institute. Brenda's journey began with a deeply personal mission to help her own child overcome anxiety and sensory challenges while waiting months or even years for formal diagnoses and medication. Drawing on her expertise as an occupational therapist, Brenda developed the Braincalm program, a simple yet powerful approach which helps children and teens, and actually even adults, become focused, calm, and able to self-regulate their behaviour. What started as a mother's determination has grown into a movement. So since launching the original programme in 2015 and founding the Braincalm Institute in 2021, Brenda has empowered thousands of parents and trained over 5,000 school staff across Ireland and beyond. Her work is transforming classrooms and homes by giving adults the tools they need to support children with sensory issues and emotional regulation challenges. So in this episode, we'll dive into Brenda's story of necessity, the background of Braincalm, and also how her practical strategies are changing lives every day. If you have ever wondered how to help a child feel calmer, more confident, and ready to thrive, then this conversation with Brenda Cassidy is for you. Brenda, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast and I really appreciate your time. I was wondering if we could start off, maybe you could share your, I suppose, personal experiences or maybe the challenges that you faced, which inspired you to create the Braincalm program and then obviously ultimately the academy, sorry, the institute.
Yeah, the Braincalm Institute.
Yeah.
No, it's a pleasure to be with you, Lynn. Absolutely. I have a condition called dyspraxia, and I didn't realize it until I was in my late 40s. I'm 56 now, but it's basically what it is it would have been known as clumsy child syndrome back in the day, many years ago. And it's much, much more than that. And I can elaborate a little bit more about the condition. And I have sensory processing issues whereby I can hear things, see things, smell things, and feel things much louder, stronger, higher than about 70% of the population. And that goes along with my brain condition, such as it is, something going on. So, in terms of my own experience, I have three now teenagers, and I knew in my mommy gut that there was something going on. I call it now SGO, but I knew there was something going on with my oldest when she was a child, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I'm an occupational therapist by profession, but at the time I worked in cancer care. End of life care was my, I suppose, my speciality. So I had never worked with children, never worked in pediatrics. So when my own children came along, goodness, they don't come with a manual. So it was a bit of a shock. But when I look back now, I realize that she is as hypersensitive as I am in some of her senses. So um, our senses being our sight, our smell, our taste, our touch, but also the senses inside our bodies, on our bowels, on our bladder, our senses in our joints and our muscles, and our senses in our balance, in our little whirly gigs in our ears. So she has a number of those sensitivities as well, oversensitivities, and she's dyspraxic as it turned out too. Another name for dyspraxia is developmental coordination delay, or DCD. So Carla, my oldest, when she was small, you know, I didn't realize how sensitive she was to light, to sound, to clothing, to probably certain foods. very hypersensitive in her, in her emotions, as I am too. And when I'm talking to parents nowadays, I think back to her and I think she was very hypersensitive in her gut. So she had what is commonly known as reflux. And as a nutritionist, um, I had to put her on special milk. I wasn't feeding her myself, but she had eczema, quite marked eczema, and as you know, that often goes hand in hand um, with chestiness and asthma,
Yeah, it's
which is
damp. Yeah, the
yeah, it's
dampness. Yeah.
it's all hypersensitivities. So, oftentimes I know this anecdotally, I suppose, Lynn, that you'll see children who have very young children with eczema and with with the chestiness, with the asthma she had, but she was also hypersensitive in her hearing. She could hear things louder than about 70% of the population. She could see things stronger. She feel things in her emotions stronger, sometimes smell certain things stronger. So I didn't realize this, but she was very she was prone to a lot of meltdowns as a child, and she was asked the the creche that she was in asked me to remove her at the age of 2 because they couldn't handle her, and I was absolutely heartbroken because you don't want your child to be labeled. But she was only reacting, her little body and brain were reacting to the world. Her senses were reacting to the outside world. So her oversensitive smell, for example, was reacting to the 18 or 20 little bowls of bolognese that are all around a semicircle table in any creche, sorry, in any preschool. Her oversensitive sight and vision was reacting to the constant moving and all of the toys and all of the activity and all of the stuff on the walls. Her hypersensitive ears were reacting to the noise and the movement. And she wasn't, the way sometimes they'll roll out the little mats and they'll expect toddlers to miraculously lie down and have a nap,
Yeah.
which always makes me wonder. um, that absolutely did not happen with her. And, so she was sensitive to her lack of sleep and her lack of naps, which made her even worse. And so she was biting and she was kicking and she was scratching. And she knows I tell this, she's permission given to tell this story now. But it was absolutely not her fault. But she was labeled as the bold and naughty child at the age of 2.
It's terrible. And she was probably just overwhelmed and
Hmm.
overstimulated.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's really great to hear you describe it in that way because sometimes we can hear it like a label for a condition
Hmm.
without really understanding what the experience of that is like, for the child.
Mm.
And you hadn't been diagnosed yourself at that stage.
Not
And
at all.
and how
No.
would you, because people talk about the terrible twos and stuff like that. So I'm sure a lot of the time it's just like, oh, this is a phase. It's
Absolutely.
probably
And
difficult. Yeah.
very difficult. I worked in an all-female setting in end of life care, palliative care as it's known. So we would all be trading stories about our children, and I would be going in tears, been called in yet again that, she had bitten someone or she'd hit out or, that she was being bold or whatnot. And a child at the age of 2, they don't understand consequences. They're putting her on the naughty step, but she couldn't understand why because she was just reacting to the bombardment on her of her body. Like I spend most of my time training and teaching school staff, sometimes parents, sometimes organizations such as foster carers, um, yeah, childminders, toothless staff, anybody who listen to me and hear me explain this in layman's terms. you know, um, she was really reacting to oversensitivity, and how I describe it for the layperson to what it feels like is if people go to a wedding, right? So particularly us women, we have our hair up, so we've got pins in our hair, we have makeup on, we mightn't usually have on, we've got maybe a tight dress and high heels. We eat a bigger meal than we normally would. We might drink a few extra drinks. The band is loud. So your skin is overwhelmed, your stomach's overwhelmed, your eyes and ears are overwhelmed. You're trying to shout at the person beside you to have a talk over the top of the band. So all of your senses are being absolutely bombarded, absolutely bombarded. And what we naturally would do is to give ourselves what's now known in schools as a sensory break. So all that means is that after a while, you step out into the dark of the night, you take off your shoes, you might take down your hair, you just close off your ears, close off your eyes, you give all of your senses a break. So for a child who has hyper or oversensitive, it's big words. I don't like big words, but sensory processing disorder means that your senses are being processed by your brain out of order to where it's causing an impact negatively on your life or where it's causing a negative impact on being able to learn. So, that's how my daughter felt going to preschool every day. And that's how she felt going to school every day, how we would feel going to a wedding, but every single day. So when people realize, oh my goodness, I know what that's like. I've stepped out in the dark. I've actually gone up to the room and disappeared, to take a break from all that bombardment on our senses. Children can't. They're
Mm.
stuck in that preschool room, they're stuck in that classroom. There is no out. And so what happens with them is like a bottle of soda or 7 Up is fizzing, 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 fizzing until it absolutely blows. So what would happen with her, when she was in primary school is that she would have meltdowns that were just really heartbreaking and quite unmanageable. And then she would be sobbing, crying, saying how sorry she was and she didn't know why would get that angry afterwards. And that is not a tantrum. It's absolutely not a tantrum. It's a meltdown. And, I really stress that to school staff and parents. They can't help it. They've reached that cliff edge. They've gone over the edge. That bottle of fizzy 7 Up has fizzed and fizzed and fizzed right through the day, where the top absolutely blows off. And that's what was happening to her in school. But you've probably heard of masking, and I'm sure maybe some
Yes.
of your listeners have heard of masking. Girls are brilliant at
Mm.
masking what they really feel. They put on a mask. It's almost like they put themselves into a straitjacket to cover up how they really feel. So she was watching other girls and learning what she should be doing and how she should be behaving and what she should be feeling. And she was mimicking them basically, but she stored it up inside and then blew when she was with the person who, loved her and cared for her the most and she felt safest with, which was me. So I suppose it was at that point, Lynn, that I decided that I needed to get her some help. And I didn't really understand what was going on. But I did get her eventually diagnosed privately because it was a 2-year wait for to have her assessed in the HSE, and it was a further 5, Lynn, before she was offered any therapy
Oh my
because they
gosh.
said that she wasn't that bad, and she wasn't that bad compared to the very, very, very long list of
Mm.
children that are, in the filing cabinets of the poor therapists, the poor occupational therapists, physiotherapists, speech therapists that are, trying to get through these reams and reams of referrals in the HSE. But that was the reality, Lynn. I was
Mm.
left with a child who was absolutely screaming with anxiety. I wasn't sure what to do. I knew it was going to be a long wait. So, it was at that point, Lynn, when she was about 7, 8, that I took the decision to step out of my own position job in the HSE and to take a career break and to try to really understand what was going on with her, what were her, what I call SGOs, her something going on. And I retrained in all things sensory and to really understand sensory. I recognized that she was clumsy, that she was flat-footed. She was slap-footed. You could hear her coming down the corridor. She had very flat hands, and her handwriting, she struggled. She overgripped her pen. Very weak in her core. So she would complain of back pain in school. And the problem was that she was just bent over the desk a lot because her core was weak. And these are all red flags, Lynn. They're all red flags for dyspraxia, except I didn't realize it until I started to study it myself. And I wrote a little book called Funpraxia. Not the best name in the world. I don't know how I came up with it, but it's actually an ebook, Funpraxia. It's an ebook on Amazon. And your listeners are welcome to pop on there and I think it's $10. And you can read it or you can download it, print it off, whatever. But I wrote it because so many people started to come to ask me, what is this dyspraxia? What's it about? What's this sensory? What's it about? So I put it into a manual, and in the manual, I talk about the red flags for dyspraxia. For her, she never crawled, and that is a real red flag for dyspraxia. Um, and my son, he didn't crawl either, and he's also been diagnosed with dyspraxia as well. I would place a bet that I didn't crawl either
Mm.
when I was a baby. And my daughter was a late walker, so she didn't walk till she was 15 till she was 18, 19 months. And the World Health Organization would say anything beyond 15 months is considered a late walker. And those were red flags that I did not see. They weren't picked up on. She was running, she was eventually walking, she was able to meet most of her milestones. But now that I really know, understand, and have studied it for years, she missed very, very key milestones that were very indicative of her condition, dyspraxia. And so, I missed that, and I talk about that all the time. Did the child crawl? If they didn't crawl, there's a big, big miss there. There's a part of the brain that connects the right and left side of the brain. I call it O'Connell Bridge. It's a clump of fibers between the right and left side of the brain, and the roadways in O'Connell Bridge are strengthened up when a baby crawls. That's the purpose of crawling. And
Wow.
that allows messages to go back and forth from the right side of the brain to the left and the left side of the brain to the right. And if the the baby has not crawlen or crawled properly, sometimes you'll see a child and they're not fully bum shuffling, they're not fully crawling. It's almost like they're dragging a leg behind. That is not crawling. That is highly indicative of dyspraxia or something else, but often dyspraxia. So yeah, I suppose it's a long answer to a short question, Lynn,
No,
as
no, it's,
how I
yeah.
came to you know to step out of the HSE and the adult world of cancer care and end of life care, and catapulted into the world of sensory dyspraxia out of absolute necessity.
Mm.
Um, and then followed along my son, who was by then getting into trouble a lot in school. And I used to joke that I would have to bring a camp bed into the school and stay there because I was getting
Oh
called so
God, love
much.
you.
And my oldest daughter has what I call if you ever take any of my courses or you look at my website or my videos, I have color coded. I have my own color coding system for understanding sensory behaviors because it's really complicated. I found it complicated and I'm dyspraxic. So the only way I could work it out was to picture the sensory issues as colors in my brain. Okay. So I would call Carla's hyper or oversensitive sensory issues where the volume button is turned up really, really high in her brain for the information coming in from her tiny little sensors in her nose, in her ears, in her eyes, up to her brain, our supercomputer, and they are being processed way too high. Almost like someone shouting at you loudly. So I
Mm.
call those blue hypersensitive behaviors, blue hypersensory sensitive behaviors. The reason I call them blue is really, really simple, Lynn. Blue is a known calming color to the brain. So it made sense to me that what we needed to do with Carla's hyper or oversensitive, too loud, too noisy, too smelly, too bright behaviors was we needed to dial them down like a volume button on a radio. And so we needed to calm them down. So blue's a calming color. So it made sense to me that we needed to blue them down, almost like we turned down the volume button, as I said, on a radio. So hers are blue. My son has the polar opposite sensory processing disorder, and I call it red. He is, and your listeners know many of these children or teens or adults, what I call sensory seeking. Okay. So I hope that I'm not complicating things too much, but whereas her volume button was turned up too high for the information in the been processed in the brain, his is turned down too low in some of his senses. And so what happens in the brain is that the brain doesn't like it when it isn't fully aware or understanding of what's going on in the extremities. So the brain doesn't like it if the information's coming in too low. So, for example, you will get a child who kicks a chair, and we call them chair kickers, and they're kicking and kicking and kicking the chair, and it looks for all the world like they're being bowled. But what they're actually doing is they're seeking the sensation of the pressure through their foot to tell the brain where their foot is, so that the brain goes, okay, now I know where your foot is. I let you concentrate on your maths. Okay,
Yeah.
so now the child has been given out to for being maybe bold or inattentive or naughty, but actually they're instinctively doing what their brain needs in order for the brain to say, okay, go ahead and concentrate now. But it looks the polar opposite. It looks the polar opposite. Another thing that these children tend to do a lot is rocking. So you might see them fidgeting, moving, squirming. You might see what my son would do a lot, which was seeking pressure through his jaw muscles and joints by chewing on the top of a pen. I call them biter, licker, sniffer, chewers. So he would have his pen chewed to smithereens, absolute smithereens, because he was constantly seeking pressure through the joints, as I said, in his jaw. As I said, he was constantly moving, fidgeting, moving, squirming. Sometimes he would actually hang upside down at the side of his chair and he would drop his pen intentionally. And what he was trying to do was stimulate the balance sensors in his ears. Okay, yet again, it looked for all the world like he was being bold and naughty and inattentive. And so he was given out to constantly. Not their fault. Absolutely not the teacher's fault. They didn't know. They didn't
Mm.
understand.
And so they're both great examples of how there's a spectrum, and so they mightn't present with exactly the same behaviors, but obviously it sounds like that color coding system is very useful and actually a really clever way of explaining to people where they can, pinpoint which, I suppose, what part of the spectrum, their child might be on. So you had to literally go back to college. Obviously, that would have been a long time to wait for help at a period when your child is developing. And I understand that people are under pressure in in the HSC and everything, resources are, it's obviously the individual therapists are definitely doing their best to get through the waiting lists, but
Mm,
you knew that you couldn't wait, so you went back and retrained to help your own kids. And
mm.
was there a point where you maybe realized that this approach that you developed to help your own kids could actually help, and make a difference to other parents and teachers who are struggling to understand their children's behaviors?
Absolutely. I mean, number one, there was really poor understanding out there. It's complicated. It is complicated. It took me a few years to figure it out. It took me a year of teaching a workshop called Sensory Made Simple before I looked around at everyone's faces and realized they still weren't fully
Yeah,
understanding what I was trying to teach them. And that's where I came up with a color coding system. My third child is dyslexic. She developed epilepsy as well. Thankfully, that has cleared. But she has what I call yellow sloth-like behaviors. So she is slow in her processing, but so incredibly intelligent. And this has nothing to do with the intelligence of the child.
of
I
course.
have three super, super smart children, but they just present in different ways. So, yeah, her concentration would be way off, but she has the observation skills of a top detective. But I suppose the turning point for me was I was busy trying to help them, understand them, sort them out. I was researching exercises that we in the OT world call sensory integration, which basically means integrating the brain, getting the brain and body to work together. That's what basically what it means. I would describe it as well as strengthening up weak areas in the brain. So if you can imagine you're driving along the M50, there are a few potholes and weak areas, and the traffic slows down, and the next thing it's way down the south side, way up the north side. Basically, what I decided I needed to do was uh, identify exercises that would build brain bypasses to allow the traffic that was getting stuck and jammed and causing the dyslexia, switching of letters, those traffic jams in the brain around the language part, and the traffic jams in the brain around the muscle part, which is dyspraxia, that if I could find the correct exercises to build bypasses in the brain to allow the traffic to move more smoothly and not cause gridlock, that I would be really well able to help them. So I found exercises that would help my oldest to dial things down and to build up her body strength. I found exercises that helped calm and settle down the fidgety, movie, squirmy, bitey, licker, chewer, sniffer, bang crash, walloper, walker about her children. Read danger, 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 seeking children, the
Yeah.
impulsives, the runners. Um, I found exercises for those. I knew what I needed to do to lift and boost the arousal level of my third child. But the problem, Lynn, was that there was nothing that I could find in the world for all three completely different types of sensory behaviors and presentations. So I decided what to do was to build it myself. So it started off really when I was asked to go and to help out in an inner city school in Dublin. And that's really where the turning point came, Lynn, because I was really bamboozled and I was thinking, my goodness, there were children with dyslexia, dyspraxia, with autism, with ADHD, with goodness knows what, because they were never diagnosed and would never be diagnosed for a host of different reasons. And there was 120 of them, and they
Wow.
wanted me to come in and sort things out.
Oh my
But
gosh.
so really, I think, Lynn, when your back is up against the wall, you will come up with the goods.
Mm.
And so I frantically came up with a very simple, one size fits all set of very specific exercises done in a specific order, each one for a specific length of time, and to bring the brain right through a regime so that it was if done on 50 minutes a day, 5 days a week. It's now called the Braincalm program. That it would help to fill in the potholes, strengthen up those weak areas in the brain or roadways, build some new bypasses in the brain and allow that traffic to flow. And when the traffic flows in the brain, that allows the child to learn, it allows them to feel calm, it allows them to feel happier, it allows them to feel in control. And the exercises also contained body strengthening elements as well, like core, like arm strength. So I set about piloting these exercises I had built for my own children with these masses of children with goodness knows, I was saying something going on, SGO, there was EGO, everything going on. Some of these poor little puppets, some of them were homeless, some of them were born to
Oh.
drug and alcohol,
Mm.
some of them were born addicted to drugs and had to be weaned off. Some of them, some of them came from neglect situations, some of them came from abuse situations. I mean, everything. But the common denominator is the brain. The brain, no matter if it's trauma, no matter if it's attachment issues, as they call it, where the parent and the child don't form a good attachment when the baby is little. And if I have my own theories around younger parents now who don't take their eyes off the phone and they have a baby and they're not making eye to eye contact with the baby, because that dramatically improves the growth of the brain in the
Mm.
first year of life. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. So, when my back was against the wall, I started to pilot this set of exercises, and shock upon shock, we started to see dramatic results. And we started to see these children's concentration improve, their attention, their management of their own behavior. It's called nowadays behavior regulation. We found that their self-esteem dramatically went up. Well, of course, if teacher's not giving out to you every 5 minutes, of course your self-esteem is going to go up. You were the bold child in the class, you were labeled. Their handwriting improved. In some cases, their sleep actually improved. So what was happening was these children were going into the Braincalm room, like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, and they were coming out 15 minutes later like little lambs, as if they'd been medicated, but without medication. And even I was shocked.
That's amazing, an amazing story.
Yeah.
Like, and what's fantastic, occupational therapy, I think, connects, not sometimes with different therapies or treatments, they focus on one part of the body. But obviously, as an occupational therapist, you are looking at that connection between the brain and the muscles and, um, you know, but the way you've described it is fantastic, Brenda. That whole traffic system, the
Hmm.
O'Connell Bridge,
Hmm.
you make it so easy to understand. And even describing, how the kids might behave and as it says on on the tin, bitey, scratchy, licky, all of that, it just makes it really clear. And I wonder, obviously your expertise as an occupational therapist, but do you think that maybe the way that your brain operates also kind of helped the fact that maybe you didn't realize that thought, as a person with dyspraxia does, that kind of helped too?
Big time, because
Mm.
I think in pictures, Lynn.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
visual learner. If you present me with a paragraph of writing, my brain starts to freeze. Um, I I take I can read complex scientific information, but what I'll do is I'll draw it out in pictures and I'll color code things. And that's the only way I can sort out or I suppose teach or communicate really complex information. And that's where I found, Lynn, I did find a solution.
Yeah,
And, it has worked remarkably, so remarkably that we've trained over 7,000 people in the last 10 years
that's amazing.
to take children for Braincalm in schools right across Ireland. Few people overseas as well have learned it online because I have it now as an online course as well. But yeah, I had to find a way to put it into what I call Monaghanese. So I'm from Monaghan originally, and I
Ooh, hold
like
that
to think
against you, being from
that's
Cavan,
okay.
no?
That's fine. I'm Monaghan by birth and Cavan by osmosis. Been living here for so many years,
Yeah.
but what we need is no fluff, no jargon, really down to earth language, which is why I call it Monaghanese. No big fancy words, no big therapy terms. In ABC, really down to earth language.
Mm.
So, two things had to happen, Lynn, that I discovered. Number one, people had to understand this in layman's terms. Number one, that was the first thing. Number two, I had to hand them over on a plate a solution that they would see results with very quickly. But that was easy to do and easy to administer. So I suppose the way that I would describe it, Lynn, is the waiting lists are so horrifically long for OT, for CAMS, for psychotherapy, for play therapy, for everything, for speech therapy. So what I decided needed to happen was that CPR, right?
Yes.
So in with CPR, chest compressions. So the two really, really smart doctors in the 1960s brought their two physical elements together of CPR. So the chest compressions and the mouth breathing, right? So they were really smart, put those two things together and said, do you know what we need to do? We need to teach non-medical people how to do this CPR so that they can go away and save lives. And they did. And so people have been trained, non-medical people have been trained in CPR right across the world for decades, right? Trained in one day, certified after a day. You have to show that you can do it properly, and away they go. So, what I decided to do in this horrific crisis that we have of long waiting lists and therapy was to put um, therapy as such into the hands of non medical people after not a huge amount of head wrecking training, right? So, for example, I will take a group of special needs assistants, okay, and I will train them within 5 to 6 hours. And within an hour, Lynn, they will understand the red behaviors, as in the seeking, moving, squirming, bang, crash, walloping, shout her out or walk her about her, seek behaviors. They understand the blue, hypersensitive behaviors. They understand the yellow sloth-like behaviors because they've seen these children. They've seen them for years, but they never understood the why. And until someone explains to you the why, you will never understand it. And within a half an hour to an hour, they were like, oh my goodness, Brenda, we've got it. And they start to talk about Jack, who's very red, and Mary, who's very blue, and maybe has bits of red, but it's the blue hyper oversensitive behaviors that really impact on her day. She's running into the corner of the yard, covering her ears. She can't cope with the noise at break time. She hates the lights, being on. They cause her to have a headache, or she's squinting at the blackboard. All of a sudden, they get it. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're a top neurosurgeon, neuroscientist, or you've had very little schooling. The way that I try to explain things is just exactly like that. No
Yeah.
fluff, no jargon.
Because you're meeting people when they're already stressed. And I'm sure they've
That's it.
already tried, maybe several different avenues looking for answers, So absolutely that's hugely important. So while you were doing this, I suppose you were transitioning from being an occupational therapist with the HSE to being it had to be a business as well. You had
Exactly.
to. So,
Mm.
did you find that challenging, or what obstacles came
Oh,
on your path?
oh, Lynn, I don't know even where to start with that.
Yeah.
Look, I'm incredibly passionate
Yeah.
about this and about helping people. That's my heart. That's my soul. That's why I became an occupational therapist. The love of doing good, doing right, helping others. I never meant for this to be a business. I'll be really honest with you. I never meant for it to be a business. I ended up on Ireland AM talking about it. Floodgates absolutely opened. The 5 years were coming to an end in the career break for the HSE, so I had to make a decision, whether to return or to try to, make this into something that could sustain a
Mm.
living for me. So yeah, I took to the road basically and traveled all over and still do to an extent, although I'm trying to transfer that into a new brain cam where people can consume it, learn it, study it, all my methods, my programs, my trainings online. But yeah, listen, when you run your own business, you have to take care of the finances, you have to sales, straight
Mm.
out sales. I had to get busy with marketing. I had to explain what BrainCam does, what it is, what benefit it is. And as I learned early on in the business world, if you're not making money, it's a hobby, as the saying
Yeah.
goes.
I know, and it's so hard when you're doing something for the good of the people. It's a difficult switch to flick in your head that you have to make a living as well, isn't it?
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
My greatest joy would be to do everything and hand it over to people
Yeah,
and
me
not have
too.
to ask for money. I
Yeah.
mean, my greatest joy. I'm incredibly creative. The right side of my brain is on fire at 5:30 or 6 o'clock every morning. And I'm coming up with new ideas and new thoughts and new ways of helping children, new exercises, new plans. But the old left side of the brain, which tends to drag behind in myself, um, that organizational part, that structure part, the left side of your brain, it would be very much more used by engineers, by accountants, by people who love spreadsheets,
Oh,
things in boxes, things. So that part of your brain is very much needed to run a business. But that part has been very difficult. I'm not going to lie, it's been very difficult. But you reach out to, in Ireland, we have the local enterprise offices. You do business called Start Your Own Business, was a course I did many years ago, and it served me really well for many years.
mm,
But yeah, for those of us in the caring, um, in the caring professions and the work that you do and the work that I do, it's extremely difficult
mm.
to focus on money. But yeah, that's what we have to do to bring it
Yeah,
to the world.
I know
Yeah.
exactly. What is your vision, say, for the future of the Braincalm Institute and how
Mm.
you think it can help people?
Yeah. So the Braincam Institute basically is an online platform where all of my trainings sit. Okay. So I've got courses for teachers to help them understand in teacher speak what's going on in their classrooms, why kids are the way they are. I've got other courses for special needs assistants called sensory breaks for SNAs. I've got teachers for course for learning support teachers. I've got the old original BrainCam intensive program, which is a year-long program. I've also got an advanced BrainCam program with another 4 blocks, which is a second year of therapy. 15 minutes a day. All of that sits on the BrainCam Institute platform. Okay.
Mm,
So, there's only so many days of the week that I can be on the road training this. I often, train schools. I've also got a new program that I have written and launched recently for preschools, because we want to try and get these little tiny brains, because they're growing rapidly, and that's the time to really get those little brains. So I have that as well. So the future of Braincalm, the Braincalm Institute, um, definitely starting to look at bringing it overseas now. I'm actually part of an Enterprise Ireland program at the moment called New Frontiers, and the Enterprise Ireland will bring a number of businesses who they see has high potential to export, and they bring us into what they call an accelerator program, and they incubate us like little business eggs for 6 months. If you can visualize, again, very
Yeah.
visual, little incubator with all us little eggs
Yeah.
sitting in it, having nice heat put on us. So myself and 12 other businesses, 13 other businesses are all in little egg incubators in Athlone at the moment, and all over the country. And so what I'm learning, Lynn, is the next part of what I need to do. How do I reach into the Department of Education, say, in the United Arab Emirates? What do I need to do to break into the US?
Mm.
How do I translate this into other languages so it can go out to Europe, Spain, French, whatever? So at the moment, that's what I'm learning to do, is more of the business of exporting your business to other countries. So the future, my dream would be, I mean, my absolute dream is that the Department of Education, for example, would take on the Braincalm program and put it into curriculum as a must
Yeah.
do, right? It's gold. It has helped thousands of kids across the country. And one of the aims of being part of this Enterprise Ireland program is to find a way to get in front of the Department of Education, Department of Children, the HSE, whoever it may be, and get Braincalm to every child who needs it in
Mm.
Ireland. I mean, that's my heart. But children right across the world can and will benefit.
Mm.
So my dream, Lynn, is get it put into the curriculum here in Ireland, but to get Braincalm to 1 million children across the world by 2030.
Yeah.
That's my goal.
That's amazing, and I've no doubt that you'll do it, Brenda, because for a program that has been developed so cleverly, that 15 minutes a day, I think you said 5 days a week anyway. I mean, what that isn't a huge effort for the rewards of the child
No.
feeling less overwhelmed and able to manage their lives, you know. Um, and as you said, getting them earlier means that their development obviously is helped. So I can't imagine that any Department of Education, I mean, in the long run, it would save money, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, and it, I suppose for me as well, another takeaway is that sometimes I'm sure, look at, I can't speak for parents who are concerned about their child's behavior, but I can imagine that it can be worrying and it can cause anxiety when you're trying to get a diagnosis of something and you don't know what that is. Um, I suppose I think that you are an amazing example of that. If you hear that someone is diagnosed with dyspraxia, oh my gosh, it will not limit you in any way. You are as clever and as smart as anybody, I've talked to, and you're applying your intelligence, to doing something that's really good for other people, So I'm in full admiration of what you've done, Brenda, So and I'm sure your children are very proud of you too.
I'm
Um
not so sure about that, Lynn.
well, as teenagers, maybe they're not thinking about it, but they
No,
will be. They will
hopefully.
be. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, Lynn, just in terms of parents, right? This
Mm,
will often come through the bloodline.
mm,
So I didn't realize it until after my own children were diagnosed that I actually suffered with this in my own childhood. 50 years ago, I was covered in bruises, and my mother was taking me to the hospital in Drogheda. They thought I had some sort of blood condition or
Yeah.
leukemia, believe it or not. But all it was I was clumsy. I was late riding a bike. I was tripping over ladders. I was trying to help my father on the farm, and I was tripping and falling over things. That's why I had bruises, because I was dyspraxic. But
Mm.
there was one TV in the house. There was, Glen Rowe on Sunday night and Andy Pandy and the Magic Roundabout as cartoons, and that was it. So there wasn't five TVs, three phones,
Yes.
two laptops, couple of iPads. There was nothing to do but get out, play in the sand, ride the bike, climb over fences, learn how to fall, learn where you. So I kind of therapied my dyspraxia out of myself by living on a farm and growing up without technology and all of that. There wasn't petrol to be driving you around the country. So if you wanted to go to your friend's house, your cousin's house, you got on a bike. And I know that can't happen these days because there's so much more traffic and it's dangerous. But what I will say is a lot of parents out there, there's a huge amount of this, Lynn, way beyond what people think. My anecdotal evidence, my own observations are that there's about 30 to 40% of any mainstream classroom has children with something going on that impacts their learning, their behavior, their ability to function in life. So you're talking about your dyspraxics, your children with dyslexia, they're all brain cousins of each other. Your dyspraxia, your dyslexia, your dyscalculia, your dysgraphia, your autism, they're all traffic jams. They're all traffic jams in the brain. They're all brain cousins of each other. But what's really difficult, and I very, very much struggled with this, Lynn, except I didn't know what was wrong at the time, is because I am hypersensitive in my own sensory processing. I thought that everybody could hear things as loudly as me, could see things as strongly as me. So what happens to me as a child and as an adult is my cup just fills up really quickly and spills over. So when I sleep, my sensory cup goes down to about three quarters. And then during the day, it fills up very quickly. And if I get overwhelmed, it spills over. Now that I know myself, I realize that I have to pull back before the cup flows over the top. So, to give you an example, I had to not speak to anyone for an hour before I came on to do the podcast with you. I had to turn the television off. I had to turn down anything that was giving sensory information through my eyes and ears and nose and everything, completely shut it off. And that was the only way I was going to be able to concentrate to speak with you for an hour, right? So I know that I'm self aware. Where it's incredibly problematic for parents is they don't understand that, for example, their volume button is turned up too high in their brain and they have a child who has something very similar. They're screaming because there's a sound that doesn't sound that loud or a particular tone in a violin or in a piece of music that feels to that child like someone's driving needles through their ears. It's so painful. So now you've got a hypersensitive mother who will tend to go into overload, trying to parent sensory children.
Mm.
And then it really becomes a very, very difficult situation. Very difficult. So I suppose what I want to try and get across as well is there a lot of most of the time these issues come through the bloodline, Lynn, and
Mm.
that's the bottom line. So I'll say to people, they'll say to me, "Oh gosh, my child has been diagnosed with autism or dyspraxia, whatever," and I'll say, "Well, is there anyone in your side or your husband's side with anything that might have come through?" Because I think it's useful for people to understand. And they'll say, "Oh, no, 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 nothing at all." And then they'll say, "Well, my brother's has dyslexia and my sister's child is autistic." And all of a sudden there's a tumble of all of these relations who have SGO something going on. And I say, there you go. That's in the bloodline. That's in the
Mhm.
bloodline. So I think it's really important for school staff to understand that is not poor discipline.
Yeah.
It's not poor discipline. This parent is trying to hang on by their own fingernails to try to parent these sensory children without understanding of what to do, and they're in a state of exhaustion themselves. So I always say when I'm teaching school staff, please, please, please have mercy. Please have mercy on the parents, please. It's
Mm.
not, home could be a very difficult place, very difficult. So that's one thing I'd really like to get across to listeners is if you've something going on, if your child's father has something going on, um, you know, first of all, don't blame yourself, but do try to understand yourself. Read it up, look on my website, you get in touch with us. Um, I'm always happy to help or signpost people.
Mm.
But I do teach the Braincalm Intensive program to parents as well. They're able to avail of it on my website
Great. I'll
and
be
take
putting
their own
links.
children through it. Oh,
Great. I'll be
absolutely.
putting links down in the show notes as
Absolutely.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because even for a parent to do it, it works just as well for parents as it does for children, Lynn. If they
Mm.
did the 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week, over the period of a year, it's like having daily therapy. It's like
Mm.
having daily occupational therapy. That's
Mm.
what it is. I never meant it to replace occupational therapy. But what I did want to do was while a child was on a waiting list for OT assessment, that they would not get worse. And in fact, they would get somewhat better. So by the
Exactly.
time they get to an OT, they would spend less time with the OT. And as you mentioned, yes, it absolutely would save money for the Department of Health, the Department of Education,
Mm.
because there's thousands of children out there who are a lot better. And some of them have actually come off the OT lists because they've become so well and their concentration is much better, their strength is much better, and they don't have that need anymore. So, my passion is to try to cut down the waiting lists for therapies so the children who desperately, desperately need it get to them. And the
Exactly.
whole system is not being clogged up by children who could be helped in a small 15-minute a day program in school every day. That's
Yeah.
something that I'm really passionate about.
Exactly. Well, that makes perfect sense.
Mm.
Brenda, I so appreciate your time, and it is a subject that's close to my heart, and you've just illuminated, certainly a lot of the issues around dyspraxia for me, and I'm sure for our listeners. And thank you for spending an hour beforehand as well, prepping. Really, really appreciate it, and I wish you the very best. I've no doubt that the Braincalm Institute is going to get go global.
From your mouth to God's ears, Lynn.
Yeah,
From your mouth to
exactly.
God's ears. You're more
That's
than welcome.
super. Thank you
More than
so
welcome.
much. Thank
Not at
you.
all.
My thanks again to Brenda for sharing her insights, particularly into dyspraxia. And it's such a great story where Brenda has not only helped her own family, but is continuing to help many, many, many other families as well. So, wishing Braincalm continued success. So I thought that I would suggest a couple of snacks which are actually calming for particularly for kids with ADHD. So we really need to avoid snacks high in refined sugar, artificial colors and preservatives because these can actually worsen hyperactivity. So snacks which have protein, which helps to regulate neurotransmitters and blood sugars, complex carbs, which provide steady energy, and omega-3 fats, which are healthy fats. And we get these from nuts, seeds, or, flax, chia seeds as well. And these all support our brain health because our brain is made up of fat and water. So we need good, healthy fats in our diet. So just a couple of calming snack options would be nut butter and apple slices. And obviously pick a good nut butter that isn't too high in sugar. Greek yogurt with berries, which of course can be made into a smoothie. And you could add some maybe chia seeds or flax seeds to that. Hummus and crackers or veggie sticks like carrot sticks or pepper slices, or celery sticks if they would eat them, So they provide fiber and slow release carbs, so that helps to maintain focus. Hard boiled eggs, if they like eggs, and blueberries. So eggs are a great source of protein and choline and B12. So choline is great for brain function, as is B12 for our central nervous system. So eggs are great, and obviously blueberries are packed full of antioxidants. Popcorn is a good alternative to, a good popcorn, which you can make at home and is fun to make at home. That's a better alternative to crisps, really, because it's, can be higher in fiber. And also, if you could add some maybe dark chocolate chips. So we'll add in some polyphenols, which are great antioxidants too. So out of some of those suggestions, I have chosen hummus to be our store cupboard staple for this episode. So hummus is believed to have originated in the Middle East, with historical references dating back to the 13th century. So it would have originated in countries like Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, and Syria. It's hard to know exactly where it came from first, but it would definitely be popular in all of those places. So and where it would be a staple dish, and of course in more recent years it has spread around the world as a popular dip, spread, or even a side dish. Hummus comes in all sorts of flavors now. I make one which has actually basil leaves in it and black pepper, but classic hummus consists of cooked chickpeas, tahini, which is sesame paste, and sesame seeds are actually full of calcium. They're a great source of calcium, so that's good as well. Olive oil, lemon juice, garlic, and salt. It is very nutrient dense. So the chickpeas provide a great source of protein, making hummus ideal particularly for vegetarians and vegans. High in fiber, so it supports our digestion, and fiber helps us it helps our motility, to make sure we want to have enough fiber every day to make sure that we have a bowel movement every day. But also fiber can help us to maintain healthy blood sugar levels, because fiber and protein slow down the release of glucose into our blood. Now, hummus also contains healthy fats. So the olive oil is a source of unsaturated fats, which are heart friendly. And the tahini, the sesame seed paste, that has good healthy fats as well from the seeds. The micronutrients in hummus are iron, magnesium. Again, magnesium is really good for calming, folate and B vitamins, which are really important for energy and our cell health and our central nervous system. So overall, it has a low glycemic index, which helps to regulate our blood sugar, making it suitable for diabetics. So again, just going back to the protein and the fiber, helping to make sure that our glucose is delivered out into our blood sort of slow and steady. Now, the olive oil and the garlic add compounds which fight inflammation and oxidative stress, so antioxidants. So just to summarise, the health benefits are that hummus promotes satiety. So because of the protein, it helps us to stay feeling fuller for longer. It supports our heart health due to the healthy fats. It may reduce the risk of chronic diseases thanks to all of the nutrients that we mentioned, and antioxidants being part of that. And again, the fat comes from healthy unsaturated sources, as in the olive oil and the tahini. The fiber content supports our digestion and satiety, and it's a great source of plant-based protein if someone doesn't eat any or much animal products, and of course the essential minerals. So hopefully there is enough information there to encourage you to add some more whole foods into your shopping trolley this week. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I just wanted to clarify that the podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional care from a doctor or trained health professional, nor constitute medical advice or services if you're in a position to need either. However, if you found it interesting, you can subscribe to make sure you don't miss future episodes, or sign up for my newsletter on lynsharkeynutrition.ie.